Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to be reviewing chapter 9 of my book. The book is on Amazon. It's called Whose Life Is It? The Moral Debt for Life Enslavement. Okay, just waiting for it to load up. All right. Chapter 9 Life Slave's Ledger, the cost that the life slave pays. Chapters 1 through 8 establish the complete mechanism of your enslavement. Chapter 1 You do not own your life, the master state does through its interference with disposal rights. Chapter 3 Your parents committed the original breach, creating the moral debt for life enslavement. Chapter 3 The state compounds this breach while extracting taxes, workforce participation, and economic activity. Chapter 3 Courts deny constitutional relief, serving as gatekeepers of life slavery. Chapter 5 State control over disposal rights operates as a legal mechanism of life slavery. Chapter 6 The state deploys comprehensive perpetual violence to maintain life slavery. Chapter 7 Capitalism extracts surplus value through violence backed coercion. Chapter 8 The public authorizes and benefits from this comprehensive violence through democratic processes. Now, we're on chapter 9. This chapter provides a complete accounting. What are the measurable costs you bear for an involuntary existence imposed without consent? What value do parents, the state, and capitalists extract? The ledger reveals total asymmetry. You pay everything, you receive nothing. The Life Slaves Ledger, a visual summary. Before examining each cost in detail, consider the complete picture. The Life Slaves Ledger, figure 9.1, presents a comprehensive accounting for your involuntary existence as a balance sheet with two columns: costs imposed versus restitution received. Now, I'm going to, because you can't see it on Amazon, I'm just going to show you the image of it so you can see it closer up. This is a Life Slaves Ledger. The price of your involuntary existence. On the left, we have the cost imposed. Physical, 28 years on maintenance, 2.7 million spent on daily deterioration, and then death. The economic cost, 101 250 hours in forced labor, 620K in taxes, 2.7 million in surplus value extracted. The psychological cost, the consciousness burden, existential threat. I don't know if you guys can see, I can make it a little bit bigger. Existential threat, emotional suffering, mental illness risk. Temporal, 54% of life on mandatory activities, only 42 to 46% on autonomous meaning. Social, forced relationships, emotional labor, social ostracism for noncompliance. Systemic, perpetual state violence, rights without remedies, courts closed through immunities. Identity, father's name imposed, family burdens, genetic inheritance without consent. Existential, meaninglessness with no solution, mortality awareness, suffering without purpose. Restitution from life enslavers, parents, may be adequate parenting, which is their obligation. Possible inheritance, this is not framed as a debt. They're dead now, so the debt remains uncollected. You receive zero from your parents. From the state, the prohibition on the right to opt out peacefully, extraction, rights without remedies, zero restitution. From society, expectation of gratitude for your enslavement, pressure to procreate and perpetuate, condemnation if you refuse. You receive zero restitution from society. Having ethics, additional suffering for refusing to enslave. This is a negative cost. So at the bottom of the ledger, it says you got screwed. Now, this is let me go back to chapter 9 because I just wanted to zoom in so y'all could actually see it. And then this breaks it down, how I came up with those numbers. The physical cost of maintaining an involuntary existence. The first line item of the life slave's ledger documents physical cost, 28.3 years on maintenance, 2.78 million spent on daily deterioration and ultimately death. You must maintain a body you never chose to have. This maintenance is not optional. Failure to maintain it results in suffering and eventual death. The costs are comprehensive, lifelong, and imposed without your consent. Daily maintenance requirements. Sleep. 7 hours per day minimum for health maintenance. 7 hours multiplied by 365 days equals 2,550 hours per year over an 80-year lifespan. That is 204 and 400 hours spent sleeping. You did not consent to needing sleep. You did not agree to spend nearly 1/3 of your existence unconscious. This requirement was imposed on you by the life enslavers who created a body with this need. If you fail to sleep adequately, you experience cognitive impairment, mood disturbances, weakened immune function, and increased risk of diseases. The body forces sleep through overwhelming fatigue. You cannot choose to stop needing sleep. This is a mandatory cost of the existence your life enslavers impose. Eating. 3 meals per day minimum, requiring food purchase, preparation, consumption, and cleanup. Conservatively, estimate 1 hour per day for all food-related activities. This is 365 hours per year, or 29 and 200 hours over 80 years. 29,200 hours over a year. You did not consent to needing food. You did not agree to spend years of your life obtaining and consuming nutrition. This requirement was imposed on you. The financial cost compounds the time cost. Average expenditure in the United States is approximately $3,008 per year. Again, there's citations at the end for anybody who wants to confirm what I said. Over 80 years, that is 240,640 spent on food. If you fail to eat, you experience hunger, weakness, eventual starvation, and death. The body forces eating through hunger signals. You cannot choose to stop needing food. Hygiene. Daily showering, teeth brushing, grooming, and waste elimination. Conservatively, estimate 30 minutes per day. That is 103 hours per year, or 14,640 hours over 80 years. You did not consent to needing hygiene maintenance. You did not agree to spend months of your life on basic cleanliness. This requirement was imposed on you. If you maintain hygiene, you experience social ostracism, health problems from poor sanitation, dental decay, and skin conditions. Society enforces hygiene standards through social pressure and employment requirements. You cannot choose to stop needing hygiene maintenance. Medical care. Routine checkups, dental visits, treatment for illnesses and injuries, and medication for chronic conditions. Average lifetime healthcare expenditure in the United States is approximately $414,000 per person in current dollars. Some people spend far more if they develop serious illnesses. You did not consent to needing medical care. You did not agree to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars maintaining a body you never chose to have. If you fail to obtain necessary medical care, you experience suffering from untreated conditions, disability, reduced quality of life, and premature death. The state does not provide universal health care as a matter of right for your voluntary existence. You must work to generate income to purchase health care to maintain an existence you did not choose. Housing requirements. You must obtain shelter. Exposure to weather causes suffering and death. Average housing costs in the United States vary significantly by location, but the national median gross rent is approximately $1,487 per month as of 2024, while median monthly homeowner costs with a mortgage are approximately $2,035 per month. Over 60 years of adult life, that is approximately 1,071,300 spent on rent at the current median gross rent of 1,487 per month, or approximately 1,465,200 for homeowners with a mortgage at the current median monthly cost of $2,035 per month. You did not consent to needing shelter. You did not agree to spend over $1 million on basic housing over your lifetime. If you cannot afford housing, you become homeless. The master state then criminalizes your homelessness, prohibiting sleeping in public, camping, or existing in public spaces without housing. As Chapter 6 documented, the master state creates homelessness through economic systems, then deploys violence against those who are homeless. You must obtain housing or face both suffering from exposure and state violence for being homeless. Clothing requirements. You must obtain clothing. Social norms and weather conditions require clothing for employment, social participation, and physical comfort. Average annual expenditure on apparel and services in the United States is approximately $1,434 per person. Over 80 years, that is $114,720 spent on clothing. You did not consent to needing clothing. You did not agree to pay over $100,000 covering a body you never chose to have. If you appear in public without adequate clothing, you face arrest for indecent exposure. If you attend employment without appropriate clothing, you face termination. Social participation requires clothing that meets contextual expectations. You cannot choose to stop needing clothing without facing legal and social consequences. Transportation costs. Unless you live within walking distance of employment, food sources, and medical care, you must obtain transportation. The average annual cost of vehicle ownership in the United States, including depreciation, financial costs, fuel, insurance, registration, and maintenance, is $12,297. Over a 60-year working life, that is approximately $737,820 spent on transportation. You did not consent to needing transportation. You did not agree to exist in geographic systems that require vehicle ownership for basic life functions. If you cannot afford transportation, your employment options are severely limited. You cannot access medical care located beyond walking distance. You face social isolation. The state structures society to require transportation, then provides inadequate public transportation in most areas, forcing vehicle ownership as a prerequisite for participation in economic and social systems. The total physical maintenance, time requirements, sleep time, 4,400 hours over 80 years. Food time, 29,200 hours over 80 years. Hygiene time, 14,640 hours over 80 years. Total time on maintenance is 240,240 hours, or approximately 28.3 years of your 80-year life. Financial requirements, food expenditure, 640,000. Housing expenditure, 1,071,360 in rent, 1,465,200 for ownership with the mortgage. Medical expenditure, 414,000. Clothing expenditure, 104,720,000. Transportation expenditure, 737, 820 over 60 years. Total monetary expenditure, 2,570,540 to 2,900,072,380. These figures, 28.3 years and approximately 2.7 million using the midpoint, are conservative estimates for basic maintenance as documented in the Life Slaves Ledger. They do not include costs of furniture, household goods, utilities, internet access, phone service, or any non-essential items. They assume no major medical expenses beyond average lifetime healthcare costs. They assume basic housing and transportation without luxury. You bear these costs because your life in slavery imposed existence on you. You spend over 28 years of your life on basic maintenance activities. You spend approximately 2.8 million on necessities. All of this was imposed on you without your consent. What restitution do you receive for these physical costs? The life slave's ledger shows zero. Economic costs of forced participation. The second line of the life slave's ledger documents the economic costs. 101, 250 hours of forced labor, 627K in taxes, 2.7 million in surplus value extracted. Chapter 7 established that capitalism forces economic participation through violence-backed, artificially created scarcity of capital. Chapter 3 showed that the state extracts value through taxation. You must work to generate income to pay for maintaining an involuntary existence. Here we quantify that extraction over a lifetime. Time spent working. Full-time employment hours requires 40 hours per week, 50 hours per year for approximately 45 years of your working life. That is 90,000 hours spent working. If you include commute time at a conservative 1 hour per day, add another 11,250 hours. The total spent on work and commute, 101, 250 hours precisely as the life slave's ledger documents, or approximately 11.6 years of your life spent working to maintain an existence you did not choose. This calculation assumes you obtain employment immediately after education, maintain continuous employment without gaps, work exactly 40 hours per week without overtime, and retire at a standard retirement age. Many people work longer hours, experience unemployment periods, or cannot retire at the standard age. The actual time many people spend working may exceed this conservative estimate. Income and taxation. Bachelor's degree holders earn a median of 2.8 million during a career, representing a significant earnings premium over those with lower levels of educational attainment. This is according to the data. I don't agree with it as a person who does have 4 degrees. Workers without college degrees earn significantly less. This income must cover all costs of maintaining existence previously calculated. From this income, the state extracts taxes at multiple levels: federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security and Medicare taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, and various fees and excise taxes combined to extract substantial portions of income. For middle income households, the total effective tax rate, including all federal, state, and local taxes, is 22.4% after accounting for government transfers. Using median lifetime earnings of 2.8 million for bachelor's degree holders, this results in lifetime tax payments of approximately 627,200,000. You work approximately 101, 250 hours over your lifetime. You generate 2.8 million in income with a bachelor's degree. The state extracts roughly 227,200 in taxes, 2.4 effective rate. After taxes, you have 2,172,800 to cover basic maintenance costs of 2,578 to 2,972. This calculation reveals the median income after taxes falls short of covering basic maintenance costs by approximately 405,740 to 799,580, including savings, emergencies, or non-essential expenditures. This deficit explains why many people accumulate debt, struggle financially despite full-time employment, and cannot afford medical care or housing security. The basic cost of maintaining an involuntary existence exceed what many people earn after taxation. You are forced to work to maintain an existence you did not choose, and your earnings after forced taxation are insufficient to cover the basic costs your life in slavery imposed on you. Chapter 7 explains the concept of surplus value extraction under capitalism. Workers create more value than they receive in wages. The difference is extracted by capitalists as profit. Here we quantify this extraction. If you work 40 hours per week and create $70 of value per hour, you generate 2,800 of value per week. If you receive wages representing 40 to 60% of the value you generate, capitalists extract the remainder as profit. Using the median lifetime earning figures of 2.8 million and assuming workers receive approximately 50% of the value they create, you created roughly 5.6 million total value over your working life. You received 2.8 million in income. Capitalists extracted roughly 2.8 million in surplus value from your labor. For consistency with prior chapters and to be conservative, the Life Slave Ledger uses 2.7 million as the surplus value extraction figure, acknowledging that the extraction rate varies by industry, occupation, and individual circumstances, but that substantial extraction occurs across all forms of wage labor. This extraction was made possible because the master state enforces property rights that enable capitalist ownership over the means of production, which you make productive through your labor. Without state violence backing capitalist property claims, you would receive the full value of your labor. The 2.7 million extracted from your labor is wealth you created that others receive. This is not pay for the capitalist. This is not payment for the capital the capitalist provided, because workers, laborers created capital itself. This is not payment for coordination or management, because managers are also workers whose labor create value. This is pure extraction enabled by violence-backed property claims. What restitution do you receive for these economic costs? The Life Slaves Ledger shows zero. Psychological costs of an involuntary existence. The third line of the Life Slaves Ledger documents psychological costs: consciousness burden, existential threat, emotional suffering, mental illness risk. Beyond physical and economic costs, an involuntary existence imposes psychological costs that are difficult to quantify, but nonetheless real. Existential distress. You must confront mortality. You know you will die. This knowledge creates anxiety for many people. You did not choose to be conscious. You did not choose to face existential questions about meaning and purpose. Your life enslavers imposed consciousness on you, and with consciousness came the awareness of death and the need to find meaning in existence that will end at some point. Existential philosophers have documented this distress. Terror management theory and psychology demonstrates that awareness of mortality affects behavior and requires psychological defenses. You must either find meaning that makes mortality bearable or maintain constant psychological defenses against existential anxiety. This work, what the Life Slave Ledger calls consciousness burden, was imposed on you without consent. The ledger also identifies existential threat as a distinct cost, the ongoing psychological way of knowing your existence will end, that all your efforts are ultimately temporary, that consciousness itself may be a burden rather than a gift. Emotional suffering. Existence includes emotional pain. Sadness, grief, anxiety, fear, loneliness, and despair are inherent features of conscious existence. You did not consent to experiencing these emotions. Your life enslavers imposed them on you by creating consciousness capable of suffering. The Life Slaves Ledger documents emotional suffering as part of the psychological cost you bear simply by existing. Mental illness risk. Mental illness risk. Nearly 1 in 5 U.S. adults experiences mental illness each year, with approximately 5% experiencing serious mental illness that substantially interferes with life activities. Depression, anxiety disorders, trauma disorders, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia cause severe suffering. Treatment is expensive and not always effective. Your life enslavers gambled with your well-being when they procreate. They could not guarantee you would not develop mental illness. They imposed existence anyway, creating the possibility that you would experience severe psychological suffering throughout your life. The ledger acknowledges this as mental illness risk, a cost imposed on you without your consent the moment your life enslavers decide to procreate. Social and relational suffering. Existence includes navigating social relationships. Rejection, betrayal, conflict, abuse, and loss are common experiences. You did not consent to needing social relationships. You did not agree to risk being hurt by others. Your life enslavers imposed social needs on you by creating a body that requires social connection and then exposed you to the risk that those connections would cause suffering. Stress from perpetual violence. Chapter 6 documented the perpetual violence that the state deploys through regulations, enforcement, and control. Living under constant threat of state violence creates chronic stress. Excuse me. You must constantly monitor your behavior to avoid triggering state violence. You must comply with arbitrary laws backed by violence. This vigilance and compliance creates psychological burden. You fear police during traffic stops. You fear prosecution if you violate regulations you may not even know exist. You fear involuntary commitment if you express a desire to opt out. You fear state violence in countless everyday situations. This fear is a rational response to real violence the state deploys. Your life enslavers impose this fear on you by creating you within a system that deploys comprehensive violence. Moral injury from witnessing injustice. Chapter 6 discussed moral injury from experiencing violence without remedy. Beyond personal experience, you witness injustice constantly. You see poverty while others live in luxury. You see people working themselves to exhaustion while others live off wealth they earned. You see police violence go unpunished. You see prosecutors destroy innocent lives without consequence. You see courts close the judicial forum through immunities and prosecutorial dismissals. Procedural dismissals. For some people, witnessing injustice without the ability to remedy it creates unbearable psychological distress. Moral injury, psychological distress resulting from actions or inactions that violate one's moral or ethical code, has been documented extensively in contexts ranging from military service to healthcare. Some people cannot accept that systems could provide a remedy, but deliberately refuse. They cannot rationalize that those who benefit from injustice choose to maintain it. This moral injury is continuous throughout life, imposed by life enslavers who created consciousness capable of recognizing injustice and caring about it. Total psychological burden. These psychological costs cannot be reduced to a monetary figure, but they are real costs you bear because your life enslavers impose existence on you. Some people experience minor psychological distress. Others experience severe mental illness, trauma, or moral injury that makes existence nearly unbearable. Your life enslavers gamble with your psychological well-being without your consent. They impose consciousness onto a being capable of suffering and then force you to bear whatever consequences resulted. What restitution do you receive from these psychological costs? The life slave's ledger shows zero. Temporal costs. Your life consumed by mandatory activities. The fourth line of the life slave's ledger documents temporal costs. 54% of life on mandatory activities, only 42 to 46% for autonomous, meaning beyond direct costs, you bear opportunity costs. Every hour spent maintaining an involuntary existence is an hour unavailable for other pursuits. Every dollar spent on necessities is a dollar unavailable for savings or discretionary spending. Time allocation over lifetime. You spend 28.3 years on basic maintenance and 11.6 years working. This is 39.9 years of an 80-year lifespan spent on basic survivals, or approximately 50% of your entire existence consumed by mandatory activities relating to maintaining a body and generating income. However, when we account for commute time, additional household management, dealing with bureaucracies, and other mandatory but unaccounted activities, the percentage rises to approximately 54% of your entire existence, precisely as a life slave ledger documents. You have approximately 46% of your life remaining for everything else: education, relationships, hobbies, travel, rest, entertainment, and any pursuit that makes existence worthwhile rather than merely endurable. But the remaining 40% includes childhood before you have autonomy, old age when physical and cognitive decline limit activities, and numerous other constraints. The actual time available for an autonomous pursuit of meaning is far less. The percentage of life available for an autonomous pursuit of meaning drops to approximately 42 to 46% of your total lifespan as the life slave ledger documents. Only 42 to 40% for autonomous meaning. You did not choose this allocation. Your life in slavery was imposed by creating a body requiring extensive maintenance and placing you in a system requiring involuntary labor. You could have spent those years not existing. Instead, you spent them maintaining an existence and working to pay for that maintenance. The scarcity of autonomous time. The life slave's ledger makes the asymmetry clear. 54% of your life goes to mandatory survival activities, leaving 42 to 40%, 46% for everything that might make existence worthwhile. This is not an accident or natural necessity. This is this is the direct result of life enslavers imposing a body with extensive maintenance requirements. The massive state forcing economic participation through artificial scarcity of capital, capitalists extracting value that extends your necessary working hours, social systems demanding compliance with arbitrary standards. If the value you created through your labor were returned to you instead of extracted by capitalists, your working hours could be reduced dramatically. If the state provided comprehensive material support for its living property instead of forcing you to maintain your own enslavement, your maintenance costs would decrease drastically. If life enslavers bore responsibility for the costs they impose, you would receive restitution that reduced this burden. Instead, you spend 54% of your finite existence on mandatory activities imposed without your consent, leaving less than half of your life for an autonomous pursuit of meaning, and much of that remaining time occurs during childhood, old age, or periods of reduced capacity. Monetary opportunity cost. After taxes, you have approximately 2.7 million over your lifetime. You must spend 2.58 million to 2.97 million on basic maintenance. This leaves you with a deficit of 410 to 800,000. If you do not need to spend nearly 3 million on basic maintenance and 627,000 on taxes, you would have 3.4 million available for other purposes. You could invest this money generating additional wealth. You could use it to pursue education, start businesses, support causes you care about, or simply enjoy financial security. Instead, you operate a deficit, just maintaining an involuntary existence and paying taxes to a state you never consented to. Most workers retire with insufficient savings because they spent their entire working lives merely covering basic costs of an involuntary existence, costs that exceed their after-tax income. What restitution do you receive for this temporal extraction? The life slave ledger shows zero. Social costs of an involuntary existence. The fifth line on the life slave ledger documents social costs, forced relationships, forced relationships, emotional labor, social ostracism for noncompliance. Beyond individual maintenance costs, an involuntary existence imposes social costs. You must navigate social relationships you did not choose within social systems you did not consent to join. Forced relationships. You did not choose your family, your life enslavers, siblings, extended relatives, and family social network were imposed on you. These relationships carry expectations. Attendance at family events, maintenance of contact, emotional support provision, care for aging parents, and continuation of family traditions. The life slaves ledger identifies those as forced, the life slave ledger identifies these as forced relationships, connections imposed on you by the circumstances of your birth that carry ongoing obligations. If you attempt to exit these relationships, you face social condemnation. You are labeled ungrateful, selfish, or mentally ill. The social pressure to maintain family relationships, regardless of their cost to you, is immense. You bear the burden of relationships you never chose with people you may not even like, respect, or want in your life. Forced social performance. Beyond family, you must navigate workplace relationships, community expectations, and social norms. You must perform appropriate emotions, display gratitude for benefits you did not request, and maintain social facades that conceal your authentic experience. The Life Slaves Ledger documents this as emotional labor, the continuous work of managing your presentation to meet others' expectations, suppressing authentic feelings that violate social norms, and performing happiness or contentment that you may not actually feel. This emotional labor is mandatory for employment, social acceptance, and avoiding involuntary psychiatric commitment. If you openly express that existence is a burden, that you did not consent to being created, that you resent being forced to participate in systems you find oppressive, you risk termination from employment, social ostracism, and potential involuntary confinement. You must pretend, you must perform, you must conceal your authentic experience to avoid punishment for refusing to be grateful for your enslavement. Social ostracism for noncompliance. The Life Slave Ledger notes social ostracism for noncompliance as the consequence of refusing these social costs. If you refuse to maintain family relationships, you are condemned as ungrateful and selfish. If you refuse to perform prescribed emotions, you are labeled mentally ill. If you refuse to procreate and perpetuate the system of life slavery, you face social pressure, questioning, and judgment. If you refuse to participate enthusiastically in wage slavery, you are labeled lazy or entitled. Society demands not just your compliance, but your cheerful compliance. You must not only participate, but pretend you want to participate. You must not only work, but be grateful for the opportunity to work. You must not only exist, but perform happiness about existing. This social pressure reinforces all mechanisms of enslavement. When you question why you must work to maintain an existence you did not choose, social pressure tells you this is normal and you should be grateful. When you resist your involuntary participation, social pressure increases isolation until compliance seems the only option. What restitution do you receive for these social costs? The Life Slave Ledger shows zero. Systematic costs of living under state violence. The sixth line item on the Life Slave Ledger documents systemic costs, perpetual state violence, rights without remedies, courts closed through immunities. Chapter 6 documented the comprehensive cost the state deploys to maintain your captivity. This violence imposes costs beyond the direct harm of each violent act. Perpetual state violence. The Life Slaves Ledger identifies perpetual state violence as a systemic cost you bear simply by existing within state control. Every interaction with the state can Every interaction with state agents carries a risk of violence. Traffic stops can escalate to shootings. Welfare application triggers investigations that separate families. Expressing a desire to opt out can result in involuntary commitment. Attempting to live outside state approved housing results in criminalization. You must constantly monitor your behavior to avoid triggering state violence. You must know and comply with countless regulations, any of which can be enforced through violence. You must carry identification, pay fees, obtain licenses, file reports, and submit to inspections. Each failure to comply risks escalating state violence. The constant vigilance creates chronic. This constant vigilance creates chronic stress. You cannot relax. You cannot assume safety. Every interaction with state agents requires careful management of your behavior, your words, and your presentation to avoid triggering violence. The cost of this perpetual violence extends beyond direct harm to include the psychological burden of constant vigilance, restricted freedom from needing to avoid triggering violence, and comprehensive social control through the threat of violence for non-compliance. Rights, with, rights without remedies. The Life Slaves Ledger documents rights without remedies as a systemic cost. You theoretically possess constitutional rights, but the magistrates denies you meaningful remedy when those rights are violated. Chapter 4 established that courts deny constitutional challenges to life slavery through procedural dismissals and immunities. Chapter 6 documented that individual instances of state violence go unremedied through qualified immunity, prosecutorial immunity, and judicial immunity. You have a right to life and liberty, but no remedy when a magistrate prohibits you from disposing of your life. You have a right against involuntary servitude, but no remedy when the state forces you to work through artificial scarcity in the form of capitalism. You may have a right to due process, but you have no remedy when the courts dismiss your challenges to an involuntary existence and rule that your right to opt out is not clearly established. Rights without remedies are worse than having no rights at all. Rights without remedies create an illusion of fairness while causing you to waste valuable time and resources defending rights which only exist on paper. They allow the magistrate to claim legitimacy through constitutional protections while denying you the remedy that would make those protections meaningful. Courts closed through immunities. The Life Slaves Ledger specifically notes courts closed through immunities are as a, excuse me. The Life Slaves Ledger specifically notes courts closed through immunities as a systemic cost. When judges violate your rights, they claim judicial immunity. When prosecutors abuse their power, they claim prosecutorial immunity. When police use excessive force, they claim qualified immunity. When legislatures create oppressive law, they claim legislative immunity. Every branch of government that could provide remedy claims immunity from suit. The judicial forum that should provide a remedy instead serves as a gatekeeper preventing a remedy. You have constitutional rights on paper. You have no actual remedy when those rights are violated. This closure of judicial forum means you have no recourse when the state harms you. You cannot sue for the harm imposed by an involuntary existence. You cannot obtain a remedy for the value extracted through taxation. You cannot challenge laws that enable your exploitation. The system is closed against remedy. What restitution do you receive for these systemic costs? The Life Slaves Ledger shows zero. Identity costs, burdens imposed without consent. The seventh line on the Life Slaves Ledger documents identity costs. Father's name imposed family burdens and genetic inheritance without consent. Beyond physical, economic, and psychological costs, an involuntary existence imposes identity costs, aspects of who you are that were determined without your input or consent. Father's name imposed. The Life Slaves Ledger specifically identifies father's name imposed as an identity cost you bear. In most cultures, you receive your father's surname at birth. This marks you as the bearer of patrilineal line, your father's name identity marker throughout your life unless you undertake the legal process to change it. Your name connects you to family history, family reputation, and family expectations you did not choose. This is not a neutral inheritance. Your name marks you as belonging to a particular family, carrying that family's legacy whether you want to or not. You must explain your name, live with associations others make based on your name, and carry identity markers you did not select. Changing your name requires a legal process, fees, and social navigation. You must justify to others why you reject the name given to you. Many face family conflict or social disapproval for changing names. The default is carrying imposed identity markers throughout your life. Family burdens. The Life Slave Ledger documents these as family burdens, expectations and obligations imposed by family membership you did not choose. You inherit family debts, financial debts your life enslavers accumulated, social debts from family reputation, emotional debts from family trauma, passed across generations, and moral debts from family actions you had no part in, but for which you may be held accountable. You inherit family expectations to continue family traditions, maintain family businesses, care for parents, produce grandchildren, uphold family reputation, and conform to family values. These expectations constrain your choices without your consent. You inherit family baggage. Genetic predispositions to disease, learned dysfunctional patterns, unresolved family conflicts, and social positions based on family class, race, and status. All of this was imposed on you without your consent. Genetic inheritance without consent. The Life Slaves Ledger notes genetic inheritance without consent as an identity cost. Your life enslavers determine your genetics through their procreation decision. You inherited genes that influence your height, weight, appearance, health, intelligence, personality traits, and disease susceptibility. You had no input into this inheritance. Some people inherit genes that cause chronic illness, disability, or increased suffering. Your life enslavers gamble with your genetic inheritance. They could not guarantee you inherit favorable traits. They procreated anyway, imposing whatever genetic burden resulted on you without your consent. You must live with the body and mind your genetic inheritance created. You cannot choose different genetics. You can only manage whatever you inherited, bearing the cost of any unfavorable genetic traits your life enslavers pass to you. Identity as a burden. These identity costs compound other costs. The name you carry affects employment opportunities. The family you belong to influences your social position. The genetics you inherited determine your health costs and physical capabilities. You bear all these identity costs because your life enslavers made decisions without your input. They chose your name. They determined your family membership. They gambled with your genetics. You live with the result. What restitution do you receive for these identity costs? The life slave ledger shows zero. Existential cost, the ultimate burden. The eighth and final line on the life slave ledger documents existential cost. Meaninglessness with no solution, mortality, awareness, suffering without purpose. Beyond all measurable costs, an involuntary existence imposes the ultimate burden, the need to find meaning in existence that may have none, awareness of death you cannot escape, and suffering that serves no purpose. Meaninglessness with no solution. The life slave's ledger identifies meaninglessness with no solution as the core existential cause. You did not choose to exist. You did not select your circumstances. You did not design systems you must navigate. You were created and placed into a world without being asked whether you wanted to participate. This creates an existential predicament. You must find meaning to make your existence bearable, even though sad meaning may not exist. You must create a purpose to justify continuing, even if that purpose is an arbitrary construction rather than an objective reality. You must pretend that your efforts will matter despite the fact that everyone will die and be completely forgotten. Existential philosophers have grappled with this predicament for centuries. Some argue you create your own meaning through choice. Some claim you find meaning through relationships, work, or contribution. Some maintain that meaninglessness itself can be accepted and embraced. But all these philosophical responses are attempts to manage a predicament your life enslavers impose on you. The life slave ledger emphasizes there is no solution to this meaninglessness, only various coping mechanisms of varying effectiveness. You must either find or create meaning sufficient to make continued existence bearable, or you must develop psychological defenses against meaninglessness. This work is mandatory. Failure to result in existential crisis, depression, or despair. Your life enslavers impose this burden by creating consciousness that requires meaning while placing you in an existence that may have none. Mortality awareness. The ledger documents mortality awareness as a distinct existential cost. You know you will die. This knowledge affects everything you do. You must manage death anxiety while living. You must create meaning. Knowing it will end, you must invest in relationships that will be severed. You must work towards goals that death will render incomplete. Terror management theory demonstrates that awareness of mortality shapes behavior unconsciously. You construct defenses against death anxiety. You seek symbolic immortality through children, creating works or contributions that outlast you. You invest in belief systems that promise transcendence or continuation. All of this psychological work was imposed on you by life enslavers who created consciousness with mortality awareness. You did not choose to know you would die. You did not ask to carry this burden. It was imposed on you without consent or restitution. Suffering without purpose. The life slave ledger identifies suffering without purpose as an existential cost. Existence includes suffering, physical pain, emotional distress, social conflict, existential threat. All are inherent features of conscious existence. You did not consent to suffering. You did not agree to experience pain. Your life enslavers imposed the capacity for suffering on you when they created consciousness. Some philosophical and religious traditions attempt to give suffering meaning. They claim suffering builds character, teaches lessons, or serves divine purpose. But these are post hoc rationalizations, attempt to make something bearable without consent. The suffering you experience serves no inherent purpose. It exists because your life enslavers created the capacity for suffering and placed you in circumstances that cause suffering. The meaning of suffering, if any exists, is meaning you must create to make your suffering bearable. More work imposed on you without consent. These existential costs may be the heaviest burden of all. Physical costs can be calculated, economic costs can be measured. But existential costs are the weight of consciousness itself, the burden of needing meaning that may not exist, knowing the death you cannot escape, and experiencing suffering that serves no purpose. Your life enslavers imposed all of this on you. They created consciousness without asking if you wanted it. They imposed meaninglessness you must resolve. They gave you mortality awareness you cannot escape. They created the capacity for suffering without purpose. What restitution do you receive for these existential costs? The life slave ledger shows zero. What you receive, the other side of the ledger. The life slave ledger presents 8 categories of costs you bear. What appears on the other side of the ledger? What remuneration do you receive for bearing these comprehensive costs? From life enslavers, zero. The life slave ledger shows what you receive from life enslavers. Maybe adequate parenting, which is their obligation. A possible inheritance, this is not framed as a debt. They're dead now, so the debt is uncollected. The result is zero. Parents might claim they provided caring during childhood. This does not offset their benefits. First, you needed care only because they created you in the first place. Providing necessities to someone you forced into existence does not discharge your obligation to that person. Second, parental care is the minimum requirement to keep alive the person parents forced into existence. It is the maintenance of the person the parents created for their own benefit, not restitution for imposing existence. Maybe adequate parenting acknowledges that many life enslavers fail to provide even minimum care. Some children experience abuse, neglect, or abandonment. But even adequate parenting is merely a moral obligation being fulfilled, not restitution for life enslavement. Possible inheritance acknowledges that some parents leave assets to children. But as Chapter 2 established, inheritance is typically not framed as a debt owed for imposing existence. It is portrayed as a gift, as generosity, as evidence of parental love. Children are expected to be grateful for receiving an inheritance rather than recognize it as partial restitution for a debt owed. Moreover, most inheritances come after parents die, too late to provide restitution during the years you already bore the cost they imposed. They're dead now. The debt is uncollected, captures this reality. By the time many life enslavers could pay what they owe, they are dead. You never collect the debt dies with them. Even when parents leave an inheritance, it rarely equals the value you provided them through your existence. You gave them meaning, purpose, emotional satisfaction, social validation, and legacy continuation. You bore decades of costs they imposed. You leave assets that are they leave assets that are a fraction of the value you provided. This is not restitution. This is a nominal payment for a massive debt that can never be repaid. What you receive from life enslavers, zero. From the master state, zero. The life slave's ledger lists what you receive from the master state. Perpetual violence, duties without enforceable rights, interference with disposal rights, total enslavement. The result is zero. The state might argue that public goods offset the cost you bear. This argument fails at every level. First, the master state provides perpetual violence. Chapter 5 establishes that the state maintains control over disposal rights, the legal mechanism of your enslavement. The master state does not provide you freedom. It prohibits your freedom. This is not a benefit. This is the enforcement mechanism of life slavery. Second, the state provides duties without enforceable rights rather than restitution. Chapter 3 documented that the state extracts approximately 627 200,000 in lifetime taxes from median workers. What does the state provide in return? Infrastructure you must pay to use through tolls and fees. Police who deploy violence to maintain your enslavement. Courts that deny relief through immunities. Schools that indoctrinate compliance. Regulatory systems that restrict freedom while claiming to provide safety. Every claimed benefit the state provides is funded through your forced taxation. You pay for roads and then pay tolls to use them. You pay the police and then they enforce laws that restrict your freedom. You pay for courts and they refuse to hear your challenges to state oppression. You pay for schools and then they cheat children to accept life enslavement as normal. The state extracts value and returns a fraction of that value as public goods while claiming this exchange is legitimate. This is not restitution. This is extraction with minimal service provision to maintain compliance. Third, the master state provides interference with disposal rights. Total enslavement. Chapter 4 established that constitutional rights without remedies are worthless. You have theoretical protection against involuntary servitude while being forced to work through artificial scarcity. You have a theoretical right to life and liberty while being prohibited from exercising autonomous disposal rights. You have a theoretical right to due process, while courts refuse to hear your constitutional challenges. Rights without remedies are not benefits. They are illusions that maintain the legitimacy of oppressive systems while providing no actual protection. What you receive from the master state, zero. From society, zero. The Life Slaves Ledger lists what you receive from society: support for life enslavement, authorization for the master state's violence, apathy and condemnation. Result, zero. Society might claim that social connection, community belonging, and shared culture provide restitution for the cost you bear. This argument fails. First, society provides support for life enslavement. You are expected to be grateful for an existence you did not request. You are expected to thank life enslavers for creating you. You are expected to appreciate opportunities you were forced to participate in. You are expected to express satisfaction with systems that exploit you. This expectation of gratitude is gaslighting. You did not consent to existence. You were forced into systems that extract value from you. You are prohibited from opting out, and you are expected to be grateful for all of this. Society does not provide any benefit. It demands you pretend your enslavement is a gift. Second, society provides authorization for the master state's violence. Society does not merely allow life slavery, it actively promotes it. You face constant pressure to reproduce, from family expecting grandchildren, from social norms marketing childlessness as a personal failure, from political systems that incentivize reproduction, from cultural narratives that procreation is fulfillment. Society does not provide you the freedom to choose whether to procreate. It pressures you to perpetuate the system by enslaving the next generation. This is not a benefit. This is recruitment. This is recruitment to become an enslaver yourself. Third, society provides apathy and condemnation. If you refuse to perform gratitude for your enslavement, you face social ostracism. If you refuse to procreate, you face judgment and pressure. If you challenge systems that exploit you, you face condemnation as ungrateful, selfish, or mentally ill. If you express a desire to opt out, you face involuntary commitment. Society does not tolerate dissent from its narratives. You must comply not just with an involuntary existence, but you must also pretend that you are grateful for your involuntary existence. Society demands your cheerful participation in your own enslavement. What you receive from society, zero. From having ethics, negative. The Life Slave Ledger includes one final category: from having ethics. The ledger shows additional suffering for refusing to enslave. The result is negative. If you recognize that procreation imposes existence without consent, you face a burden that those without ethics do not bear. You cannot procreate without acknowledging you would be imposing another person all the costs this chapter has documented. You cannot create another life slave without recognizing you would be starting the cycle of enslavement all over again. This recognition imposes costs on you. Social isolation. Most people procreate. If you refuse, you are marked as different, as outside the norm, as suspect. You struggle to find partners who share your ethical commitment. You face conflict with family who expect you to provide grandchildren. You may find fewer people who understand your reasoning. Grief for children not created. Some people feel a genuine desire to parent, recognizing that acting on this desire would impose existence without consent creates grief. You mourn the children you cannot ethically create. You experience loss for relationships that will never exist. This grief is real even if the children never existed. Moral burden. You recognize that most people procreate despite knowing they impose existence without consent. You see the exploitation continue generation after generation. You know you could end your contribution by refusing to procreate, by refusing to participate, but you also know your refusal will not stop others from procreating. You bear the moral burden of witnessing ongoing harm you are powerless to prevent. Condemnation from others. When you explain your ethical position, many react with hostility. They feel judged by your refusal to procreate. They feel their own procreation decisions are implicitly criticized. They condemn you for refusing to participate in the enslavement they participate in. Having ethics imposes costs that those without ethics do not bear. This makes the ethical position costly rather than beneficial. You suffer more for recognizing exploitation than you would if you simply participated in exploitation like most people do. What you receive from having ethics, negative. The total complete accounting. You got screwed. The life slaves ledger presents the complete accounting, what you bear. Physical, 28.3 years on maintenance, 2.78 million spent on daily deterioration and death, and excuse me. Economic, 101, 250 hours on forced labor, 627K in taxes, 2.7 million in surplus value extracted. Psychological, consciousness burden, existential threat, emotional suffering, mental illness risk. Temporal, 54% of life on mandatory activities, only 42 to 46% on autonomous meaning. Social, forced relationship, emotional labor, social ostracism for noncompliance. Systemic, perpetual state violence, rights without remedies, courts closed through immunities. Identity, father's name imposed, family burdens, genetic inheritance without consent. Existential, meaningless with no solution, mortality awareness, suffering without purpose. What you receive from life enslavers, you receive zero. From the master state, you receive zero. From society, you receive zero. From having ethics, negative. As the life slaves ledger concludes in bold text, you got screwed. The asymmetry is total. You bear all the costs, they receive all the benefits. You provide approximately 6 million in measurable value, maintenance costs of 2.7 million plus surplus value of 2.7 million, taxes of 227K plus 39.9 years of time plus psychological suffering plus ongoing extraction. That contributes every day you are forced to exist. What do you receive in restitution? Zero. Actually, less than zero, because having ethics imposes additional suffering. This is not a reciprocal exchange. This is not a social contract. This is systemic exploitation where those who benefit refuse to remunerate those who bear all the costs. What this reveals, the life slave ledger provides undeniable documentation of comprehensive exploitation, 8 categories of costs imposed, 0 restitution received. The accounting is complete. The debt is everything. The numbers are clear. The asymmetry is total. The exploitation is comprehensive. You are forced into existence to serve others' purpose. You are prohibited from opting out to maintain their extraction. You bear all costs while they receive all benefits. This is slavery documented through accounting that makes denial impossible. What they owe. Life slavers owe you for imposing existence without consent. Chapter 2, establish forced heirship as minimum restitution. Life enslavers extracted value. They extracted meaning, purpose, emotional satisfaction, and social validation while you bore all the costs. They owe everything because they impose everything without consent. The state owes you for prohibiting your exit while extracting value. Chapter 3 establishes that the state owes either unconditional opt-out rights or full socialism. The life slaves ledger confirms this is necessary. The state extracted 627 and 200 in taxes while providing inadequate services and enabling capitalism to extract another 2.7 million in surplus value. The public owes you for authorizing state violence. Society benefits from your forced economic participation, refuses to reform oppressive institutions, and closes the judicial forum through immunities. They owe you institutional reform, material restitution, and autonomous disposal rights. Capitalists owe you for extracting surplus value from your labor. Chapter 7 establishes that workers are legitimate owners of the capital they make productive. The life slave ledger quantifies the theft, 2.7 million in surplus value extracted over your lifetime through property claims the state enforces with violence. The debt each party owes is quantifiable, approximately 6 million in measurable economic costs, plus 39.9 years, plus psychological suffering, plus the ongoing extraction they continue every day you are forced to exist. What you will likely receive? Nothing. Most life enslavers die before acknowledging any moral debt. The master state continues prohibition while refusing to maintain its living property. The public continues authorizing state violence. Capitalists continue extracting surplus value. You will likely bear all costs throughout your life. provide all value, receive no restitution, and die still enslaved. The accounting shows what is owed. History shows enslavers do not voluntarily free slaves or remunerate those they enslave. Change requires organized resistance that makes maintaining slavery more costly than ending it. Conclusion: the ledger is clear. You got screwed, literally and comprehensively screwed by every party that benefits from your enslavement. The numbers prove it. You bear 2.7 million in forced expenditures just for basic maintenance of an existence you never chose. You bear another 2.7 million in surplus value extracted from your labor by capitalists who contribute nothing. You bear 627,200 in taxes extracted by a state that prohibits your exit while providing inadequate services. You bear 39.9 years of your finite life spent on survival activities rather than an autonomous pursuit of meaning. You bear comprehensive psychological costs, including consciousness itself, existential threat, emotional suffering, and moral injury from witnessing injustice without remedy. You provided approximately 6 million in measurable value, plus decades, plus psychological suffering. What did you receive in restitution? Zero. Actually, less than zero, because you also bear additional burdens like emotional labor, performing happiness for others, identity burdens, carrying family legacies you never chose, and ethical responsibilities for mitigating harm and systems others created. Every party extracts value. Life enslavers extracted meaning, purpose, emotional satisfaction, social validation, and a sense of legacy from your existence. The state extracted 627,000 in taxes, your forced economic participation, plus political legitimacy from your coerced consent. The public authorized systems that enslave you, closed judicial reforms that might provide remedy, and refused legislative reform despite having the power to change everything. Capitalists extracted 2.7 million in surplus value from your labor through property claims that the master state enforces through violence. You bear everything. They receive everything. You absolutely got screwed. The life slave ledger provides undeniable documentation of this comprehensive exploitation. 8 categories of costs were imposed. 0 restitution was received. The accounting is complete. The debt is everything. Chapter 9 has established the ultimate asymmetry through precise accounting, but this analysis reveals a deeper question. What is the root cause of all of this? Where does the chain of enslavement begin? Chapter 10 demonstrates procreation itself. Your life enslaver's decision to create you without your consent is the ultimate breach from which all subsequent exploitation flows. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for listening to this. For those of you who are new to my channel, you can go back and listen because I've already covered chapters 1 through 8. And so I guess next week, and I'm going to try to cover chapter 10, and then we have chapter 11. So we're almost done reviewing this book, and then we can get into some discussions about it. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. This one, I'm not really good with math, but the hardest part about this was making it consistent throughout the entire book, so that I'm not contradicting myself, especially with the numbers. I had to check, I had to cross-reference the chapters and everything to make sure they were consistent. So that was a little bit difficult, but this was not an easy book to write. It took me about 4 to 5 months to write it. But even then, I wasn't finished. I'm still going through it to see if there's any inconsistencies or errors in here. So I'm assuming you mean that I need Jesus Christ. Yeah, we can discuss that if you want to. We can discuss that on Find Gnosis channel. I believe Jesus is already in me. I don't need to find Jesus. Jesus is not external. God is already in me. It's already inside of us. So you can pray to some man in the sky. It's to no avail. You can pray all you want. You're not going to get any answers. I'm just going to go through these comments. You're not gonna like this. No, I I could almost. I didn't even include God in this because I'm. This is about the state, the master state, and parents, their collaboration to enslave you. If you want me to address God, I can do that too. We can. If you're talking about that evil demiurge of the Old Testament, that is an evil sadistic fucker, and we don't like him over here. All right, y'all. I don't know. I'm probably going to come back later. If you guys want to have a panel discussion, I've already posted that as a live stream. And then Illicit Mind is going to be interviewing me about my book on his channel. So look forward to that. I'll try to post it on my channel too, but you guys can catch it live on Illicit Mind's channel. I want to at least go through these comments before I get off here. Right. They don't care about these children. No, I actually was a Christian I would probably say up until I was about 27. I was not happy as a Christian. I was miserable. I lived with religious trauma of the fear of going to hell. Um, I rebuke Christianity in the name of the Lord. It is evil. It is enslavement, and I would say that it's child abuse to even subject your children to that evil religion. No, no, absolutely not. And I don't want to spend an eternity anywhere. I want this shit to be over. Great, I'm already in hell. All right, I'm about to get out here. I don't know if I can go through all these comments. But I'm glad that maybe I need to be doing live streams early in the morning because I don't usually get these many comments. But I do appreciate them.